and hope are mixtures of grief and joy. As in optics, it is a proof that a colored ray of the sun passing through a prism is a composition of two others. When, as you diminish or increase the quantity of either, you find it prevail proportionably, more or less in the composition. I am sure neither natural nor moral philosophy admits of stronger proofs. Probability is of two kinds. Either when the object is really in itself uncertain, and to be determined by chance, or when, though the object be already certain, yet it is uncertain to our judgment, which finds a number of proofs on each side of the question. Both these kinds of probabilities cause fear and hope, which can only proceed from that property in which they agree, viz., the uncertainty and fluctuation they bestow on the imagination by that contrariety of views, which is common to both. It is a probable good or evil that commonly produces hope or fear, because probability, being a wavering and unconstant method of surveying an object, causes naturally a like mixture and uncertainty of passion. But we may observe that wherever from other causes this mixture can be produced, the passions of fear and hope will arise, even though there be no probability, which must be allowed to be a convincing proof of a present hypothesis. We find that an evil, barely conceived as possible, does sometimes produce fear, especially if the evil be very great. A man cannot think of excessive pains and tortures without trembling, if he be in the least danger of suffering them. The smallness of the probability is compensated by the greatness of the evil, and the sensation is equally lively, as if the evil were more probable. One view or glimpse of the former has the same effect as several of the latter. But they are not only possible evils that cause fear, but even some allowed to be impossible, as when we tremble on the brink of a precipice, though we know ourselves to be in perfect security, and have it in our choice whether we will advance a step farther. This proceeds from the immediate presence of the evil, which influences the imagination in the same manner as the certainty of it would do, but being encountered by the reflection on our security, is immediately retracted, and causes the same kind of passion, as when from a contrariety of chances contrary passions are produced. Evils that are certain have sometimes the same effect in producing fear as the possible or impossible. Thus a man in a strong prison, well guarded, without the least means of escape, trembles at the thought of the rack to which he is sentenced. This happens only when a certain evil is terrible and confounding, in which case the mind continually rejects it with horror, while it continually presses in upon the thought. The evil is there fixed and established, but the mind cannot endure to fix upon it, from which fluctuation and uncertainty there arises a passion of much the same appearance with fear. But it is not only where good or evil is uncertain as to its existence, but also as to its kind, that fear or hope arises. Let one be told by a person whose veracity he cannot doubt of, that one of his sons is suddenly killed. It is evident the passion this event would occasion would not settle into pure grief till he got certain information, which of his sons he had lost. Here there is an evil certain, but the kind of it uncertain. Consequently the fear we feel on this occasion is without the least mixture of joy, and arises merely from the fluctuation of the fancy betwixt its objects. And though each side of the question produces here the same passion, yet that passion cannot settle, but receives from the imagination a tremulous and unsteady motion, resembling in its cause, as well as in its sensation, the mixture and contention of grief and joy. From these principles we may account for a phenomenon in the passions, which at first sight seems very extraordinary, viz., that surprise is apt to change into fear, and everything that is unexpected affrights us. The most obvious conclusion from this is that human nature is in general pusillanimous, since upon the sudden appearance of any object, we immediately conclude it to be an evil, and without waiting till we can examine its nature, whether it be good or bad, are at first affected with fear. This, I say, is the most obvious conclusion, but upon farther examination we shall find that the phenomenon is otherwise to be accounted for. The suddenness and strangeness of an appearance naturally excite a commotion in the mind, like everything for which we are not prepared, and to which we are not accustomed. This commotion, again, naturally produces a curiosity or inquisitiveness, which being very violent from the strong and sudden impulse of the object, becomes uneasy, and resembles in its fluctuation and uncertainty the sensation of fear or the mixed passions of grief and joy. This image of fear naturally converts into the thing itself, and gives us a real apprehension of evil, as the mind always forms its judgments more from its present disposition than from the nature of its objects. Thus all kinds of uncertainty have a strong connection with fear, even though they do not cause any opposition of passions by the opposite views and considerations they present to us. A person who has left his friend in any malady will feel more anxiety upon his account than if he were present, though perhaps he is not only incapable of giving him assistance, but likewise of judging of the event of his sickness. In this case, though the principal object of the passion, viz., the life or death of his friend, be to him equally uncertain when present as when absent, yet there are 1,000 little circumstances of his friend's situation and condition, the knowledge of which fixes the idea, and prevents that fluctuation and uncertainty so near allied to fear. Uncertainty is, indeed, in one respect as near allied to hope as to fear, since it makes an essential part in the composition of the former passion, but the reason why it inclines not to that side is that uncertainty alone is uneasy, and has a relation of impressions to the uneasy passions. It is thus our uncertainty concerning any minute circumstance relating to a person increases our apprehensions of his death or misfortune. Horace has remarked this phenomenon. Ut accidens implumibus pullus avis serpentium elapsus timet, magus relictus non, ut idsit, auxil, latura plus praesentibus. As a bird, watching over her fledglings, is more afraid of their being attacked by snakes if she were to leave them, even though, were she to stay, she would not be any more capable of helping them when they were with her. But this principle of the connection of fear with uncertainty I carry farther, and observe that any doubt produces that passion, even though it presents nothing to us on any side but what is good and desirable. A virgin, on her bridal night, goes to bed full of fears and apprehensions, though she expects nothing but pleasure of the highest kind, and what she has long wished for. The newness and greatness of the event, the confusion of wishes and joys so embarrass the mind, that it knows not on what passion to fix itself, from whence arises a fluttering more unsettledness of the spirits, which being, in some degree, uneasy, very naturally degenerates into fear. Thus we still find that whatever causes any fluctuation or mixture of passions, with any degree of uneasiness, always produces fear, or at least a passion so like it, that they are scarcely to be distinguished. I have here confined myself to the examination of hope and fear in their most simple and natural situation, without considering all the variations they may receive from the mixture of different views and reflections. Terror, consternation, astonishment, anxiety, and other passions of that kind are nothing but different species and degrees of fear. It is easy to imagine how a different situation of the object, or a different turn of thought, may change even the sensation of a passion, and this may in general account for all the particular subdivisions of the other affections, as well as of fear. Love may show itself in the shape of tenderness, friendship, intimacy, esteem, goodwill, and in many other appearances which at the bottom are the same affections and arise from the same causes, though with a small variation, which it is not necessary to give any particular account of. It is for this reason I have all along confined myself to the principal passion. The same care of avoiding prolixity is the reason why I waive the examination of the will and direct passions, as they appear in animals, since nothing is more evident than that they are of the same nature, and excited by the same causes as in human creatures. I leave this to the reader's own observation, desiring him at the same time to consider the additional force this bestows on the present system. Sect X of curiosity, or the love of truth. But methinks we have been not a little inattentive to run over so many different parts of the human mind, and examine so many passions, without taking once into the consideration that love of truth, which was the first source of all our inquiries. 'Twill therefore be proper, before we leave this subject, to bestow a few reflections on that passion, and show its origin in human nature. It is an affection of so peculiar a kind, that it would have been impossible to have treated of it under any of those heads which we have examined, without danger of obscurity and confusion. Truth is of two kinds, consisting either in the discovery of the proportions of ideas, considered as such, or in the conformity of our ideas of objects to their real existence. It is certain that the former species of truth is not desired merely as truth, and that it is not the justness of our conclusions which alone gives the pleasure. For these conclusions are equally just when we discover the equality of two bodies by a pair of compasses, as when we learn it by a mathematical demonstration, and though in the one case the proofs be demonstrative, and in the other only sensible, yet generally speaking, the mind acquiesces with equal assurance in the one as in the other, and in an arithmetical operation, where both the truth and the assurance are of the same nature, as in the most profound algebraical problem, the pleasure is very inconsiderable, if rather it does not degenerate into pain, which is an evident proof that the satisfaction which we sometimes receive from the discovery of truth proceeds not from it merely as such, but only as endowed with certain qualities. The first and most considerable circumstance requisite to render truth agreeable is the genius and capacity which is employed in its invention and discovery. What is easy and obvious is never valued, and even what is in itself difficult, if we come to the knowledge of it without difficulty, and without any stretch of thought or judgment, is but little regarded. We love to trace the demonstrations of mathematicians, but should receive small entertainment from a person who should barely inform us of the proportions of lines and angles. Though we reposed the utmost confidence both in his judgment and veracity, In this case it is sufficient to have ears to learn the truth. We never are obliged to fix our attention or exert our genius, which of all other exercises of the mind is the most pleasant and agreeable. But though the exercise of genius be the principal source of that satisfaction we receive from the sciences, yet I doubt if it be alone sufficient to give us any considerable enjoyment. The truth we discover must also be of some importance. It is easy to multiply algebraical problems to infinity, nor is there any end in the discovery of proportions of conic sections, though few mathematicians take any pleasure in these researches, but turn their thoughts to what is more useful and important. Now the question is, after what manner this utility and importance operate upon us? The difficulty on this head arises from hence, that many philosophers have consumed their time, have destroyed their health, and neglected their fortune, in the search of such truths as they esteemed important and useful to the world, though it appeared from their whole conduct and behavior that they were not endowed with any share of public spirit, nor had any concern for the interests of mankind. Were they convinced that their discoveries were of no consequence, they would entirely lose all relish for their studies, and that though the consequences be entirely indifferent to them, which seems to be a contradiction. To remove this contradiction, we must consider that there are certain desires and inclinations which go no farther than the imagination, and are rather the faint shadows and images of passions than any real affections. Thus, suppose a man who takes a survey of the fortifications of any city, considers their strength and advantages, natural or acquired, observes the disposition and contrivance of the bastions, ramparts, mines, and other military works, it is plain that, in proportion as all these are fitted to attain their ends, he will receive a suitable pleasure and satisfaction. This pleasure, as it arises from the utility, not the form of the objects, can be no other than a sympathy with the inhabitants, for whose security all this art is employed, though it is possible that this person, as a stranger or an enemy, may in his heart have no kindness for them, or may even entertain a hatred against them. It may indeed be objected that such a remote sympathy is a very slight foundation for a passion, and that so much industry and application, as we frequently observe in philosophers, can never be derived from so inconsiderable and original. But here I return to what I have already remarked, that the pleasure of study conflicts chiefly in the action of the mind, and the exercise of the genius and understanding in the discovery or comprehension of any truth. If the importance of the truth be requisite to complete the pleasure, it is not on account of any considerable addition, which of itself it brings to our enjoyment, but only because it is, in some measure, requisite to fix our attention. When we are careless and inattentive, the same action of the understanding has no effect upon us, nor is able to convey any of that satisfaction which arises from it when we are in another disposition. But beside the action of the mind, which is the principal foundation of the pleasure, there is likewise required a degree of success in the attainment of the end, or the discovery of that truth we examine. Upon this head I shall make a general remark, which may be useful on many occasions, viz., that where the mind pursues any end with passion, though that passion be not derived originally from the end, but merely from the action and pursuit, yet by the natural course of the affections, we acquire a concern for the end itself, and are uneasy under any disappointment we meet with in the pursuit of it. This proceeds from the relation and parallel direction of the passions above mentioned. To illustrate all this by a similar instance, I shall observe that there cannot be two passions more nearly resembling each other than those of hunting and philosophy. Whatever disproportion may at first sight appear betwixt them, it is evident that the pleasure of hunting conflicts in the action of the mind and body, the motion, the attention, the difficulty, and the uncertainty. It is evident likewise that these actions must be attended with an idea of utility, in order to their having any effect upon us. A man of the greatest fortune, and the farthest removed from avarice, though he takes a pleasure in hunting after partridges and pheasants, feels no satisfaction in shooting crows and magpies, in that because he considers the first as fit for the table, and the other as entirely useless. Here it is certain that the utility or importance of itself causes no real passion, but is only requisite to support the imagination, and the same person who overlooks a 10 times greater profit in any other subject is pleased to bring home half a dozen woodcocks or plovers, after having employed several hours in hunting after them. To make the parallel betwixt hunting and philosophy more complete, we may observe that though in both cases the end of our action may in itself be despised, yet in the heat of the action we acquire such an attention to this end, that we are very uneasy under any disappointments, and are sorry when we either miss our game, or fall into any error in our reasoning. If we want another parallel to these affections, we may consider the passion of gaming, which affords a pleasure from the same principles as hunting and philosophy. It has been remarked that the pleasure of gaming arises not from interest alone, since many leave a show gain for this entertainment. Neither is it derived from the game alone, since the same persons have no satisfaction when they play for nothing, but proceeds from both these causes united. Though separately they have no effect. It is here, as in certain chemical preparations, where the mixture of two CLA and transparent liquids produces a third, which is opaque and colored. The interest which we have in any game engages our attention, without which we can have no enjoyment, either in that or in any other action. Our attention being once engaged, the difficulty, variety, and sudden reverses of fortune still farther interest us, and it is from that concern our satisfaction arises. Human life is so tiresome a scene, and men generally are of such indolent dispositions, that whatever amuses them, though by a passion mixed with pain, does in the main give them a sensible pleasure, and this pleasure is here increased by the nature of the objects, which being sensible, and of a narrow compass, are entered into with facility, and are agreeable to the imagination. The same theory that accounts for the love of truth in mathematics and algebra may be extended to morals, politics, natural philosophy, and other studies, where we consider not the other abstract relations of ideas, but their real connections and existence. But beside the love of knowledge, which displays itself in the sciences, there is a certain curiosity implanted in human nature, which is a passion derived from a quite different principle. Some people have an insatiable desire of knowing the actions and circumstances of their neighbors, though their interest be no way concerned in them, and they must entirely depend on others for their information, in which case there is no room for study or application. Let us search for the reason of this phenomenon. It has been proved at large that the influence of belief is at once to enliven and infix any idea in the imagination, and prevent all kind of hesitation and uncertainty about it. Both these circumstances are advantageous. By the vivacity of the idea we interest the fancy, and produce, though in a lesser degree, the same pleasure, which arises from a moderate passion. As the vivacity of the idea gives pleasure, so its certainty prevents uneasiness. By fixing one particular idea in the mind, and keeping it from wavering in the choice of its objects. It is a quality of human nature, which is conspicuous on many occasions, and is common both to the mind and body, that too sudden and violent a change is unpleasant to us, and that however any objects may in themselves be indifferent, yet their alteration gives uneasiness, as it is the nature of doubt to cause a variation in the thought, and transport us suddenly from one idea to another. It must of consequence be the occasion of pain. This pain chiefly takes place where interest, relation, or the greatness and novelty of any event interests us in it. It is not every matter of fact of which we have a curiosity to be informed, neither are they such only as we have an interest to know. It is sufficient if the idea strikes on us with such force, and concerns us so nearly, as to give us an uneasiness in its instability and inconstancy. A stranger, when he arrives first at any town, may be entirely indifferent about knowing the history and adventures of the inhabitants, but as he becomes farther acquainted with them, and has lived any considerable time among them, he acquires the same curiosity as the natives. When we are reading the history of a nation, we may have an ardent desire of clearing up any doubt or difficulty that occurs in it, but become careless in such researches, when the ideas of these events are, in a great measure, obliterated. Book 3 of Morals.